Hello and welcome to our second module on the second day of the Service First online workshop. Thanks for participating. I'm joined here with Don Harper from the Fish and Wildlife Service. I will introduce Don in just a moment. We also have Chris Moyer, our National Service First Coordinator, on the phone to help answer questions after Don gives his presentation. I'm Lyra Matthews, the Service First Coordinator for Colorado. We are on our final of the thematic presentations. We previously heard from the National Park Service on resource issues, the Forest Service on fire, BLM on management administration, and Don is going to be talking about GIS and technology. This presentation will cover best management practices, issues and concerns, and ideas for the future. There'll be plenty of time after the presentation for your questions and comments and any ideas you have for Service First in the future. Following the presentation, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with the leadership from all four agencies, as well as the presenters from the last 2 days to talk about Service First in the future and go over some of the ideas that they heard from these sessions today and yesterday. So just to remind everyone, we now are enabling you to ask questions both via the question website as well as sending a text with your question. So that information is up on the screen. So please use both of those. It's great to get into all these questions and see some of the ideas that you have. Just so you know, we are taping this, and these presentations will be recorded and put on the Service First website so that you and others in your office who weren't able to participate will be able to download it and view this information later. If you're having technical difficulties, we have we have an email box set up for that, servicefirstquestions@blm.gov. All right, I think that's all of the technical items I have for now, so I'd now like to introduce Don Harper. Don began his GIS career studying at Haskell Indian Nations University and the University of Kansas. During these years, Don was a SCEP with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and a STEP with the U.S. Geological Survey. Upon graduation, Don took a position with the USGS as a physical scientist, working in the GIS remote sensing arena for over 7 years in the Henderson, Nevada USGS Water Science Center. Over the last 6 years, Don has been working as the geographer for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Nevada Fish and Wildlife Office. Don is currently in a supervisory role for GIS operations of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in both the Ecological Studies Office and the National Wildlife Refuge located in Nevada. Don also sits as the co-chair of the Southern Nevada Agency Partnership GIS team and on the board of directors for Nevada Geographical Information Society.
Hi. Well, thank you and welcome to the afternoon. I've got to apologize for the presentation not being all glitz and glamour with all the fancy bells and whistles that we usually have with GIS, but we'll continue on. Are we ready to roll? Okay. Historically, in GIS, it's been thought of as a cartographic tool, just making pretty maps. And up until recently, well, not up until recently, but it's been a situation with getting rare data. Spatial data has been, we've had to beg, borrow, and steal to get data. So in the GIS community, we'll work with other GIS professionals in other agencies, other realms, to share data back and forth and help develop data together. So that kind of sits into a natural fit for Service First in the area. Well, today we have an abundance of data, spatial data. When I started out with the Fish and Wildlife Service 6 years ago in Nevada, we had about 6 gigabytes of data, and today we are pushing 13 terabytes. The key is to know what is the right data to use. You got to look at scale, have to look at the purpose of the data. And that's part of the purpose, or the reason that we, as GIS professionals, continue to push for that. Today we have networks in the GIS community that are, and we're supporting one another, Those organizations are with the Esri, NGIS, Nevada Geographic Information Society. Each state has their own. We're also guided at the national level by the Federal Geographic Data Committee, which are setting standards for the GIS community. Managing spatial data and systems are challenges we face now and in the future. And that is that we have to be able to manage the data that we have, and we also have to manage our IT support systems and infrastructure that we use in the GIS realm. Okay, in all our everyday work environments, every project has a spatial component. The GIS staff are intimately involved with all projects within an organization's programs, except maybe the administrative. But we have a pulse on all the agencies' operations, and that's through the spatial component that we support. And part of that is, no matter where you go, there you are. Every project, every piece of data you collect has an X, Y, and Z value associated with it. And that's where the GIS is played into. Every mission benefits from the information retrieved from spatial data. There's patterns, boundaries, the species data. And in the GIS community, we kind of joke around that, especially in the interagency programs we work on, that the species that we have, they don't care what the boundaries are, the state boundaries, agency boundaries. They go where they're going to go. So GIS and working in a service-first environment helps facilitate the better data management of species data in that case. We now have the technology and the infrastructure and the GIS and IT communities now brought GIS to the new age, where the geographic information systems are now becoming the true information systems that they were dreamed of in the beginning of the programs. So today, GIS is truly an information system. You can see that with our iPhones, our GPS navigation systems that we have in our vehicles. Even with my iPhone now, I can get on there and I can track where my kids are at their schools with their iPhones, so it's a good thing to have. And we all use Google Earth and Google Maps for some degree too. Some examples of projects that are working interagency-wise and service-first-wise are invasive weed projects, exotic plants. There's partnerships between the national parks, inventory monitoring networks, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service inventory and monitoring zones. Organizations monitoring ecological conditions within the Sonoran, Chihuahuan deserts and the southern plains. This is an opportunity to share scientists, survey protocols and field crews, consolidate data management through shared data, and storage, field collection, and applications. This is a great point for scientists to work together and combining spatial data. But the spatial data, like we say, is just a tool. And it's a very powerful tool, but the scientists are the ones that are doing the work in the field that need to get this data to them. So we need to work together. Some of the successes of the exotic plant and invasive weeds work is they're using diverse skills of data management staff across all monitoring units, IT infrastructure, the GIS, project management, and software development. This is key in situations like this. You have to get all scientists working together, and we'll get into some of their things here later on. You only need to develop support for one tool, one data set used across. It's really good to have all scientists and IT and GIS people working together to develop the databases that the information you're trying to collect is collected correctly and properly. It helps reduce cost too. You don't have to reinvent the wheel to develop the data that you're working on. And you get a standard with the data collection too, and then that makes science repeatable. There we have scientific integrity. You also have cost savings. And when you do this, by not reinventing the wheel, by standardizing data sets and databases, you have a protocol that's set, and therefore you can save money, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And in this case, it was $30,000. So, challenges, overcoming different terminologies. Each of our agencies have different missions. That's going to be a standard problem. The scientists are working in different goals, different areas, so you have to really work hard together to come up with a common terminology and nomenclatures and naming conventions that you want to use within a data set. And this is not an easy task. It takes time. We've done it in Southern Nevada, and as they've done here in the exotic plants situation also, and I'm sure it's happening across the nation. Data availability for each office. That goes back to the earlier point where data was kind of a rare thing. It's coming around, and with the projects like this and Service First and within all the agencies working together and partnerships going on, you see data connectivity, data availability growing. Excuse me a sec. As we grow into the LC-MAP, conservation data through our conservation through data management, this is getting into the LCC's landscape conservation cooperatives, a natural service first environment. The Great Northern LCC is working together to develop and integrate data together and to share data across the board through all parties that are working on the LCCs. LCCs are also a big thing across the nation right now. We have in Southern Nevada, we've got the Desert LCC that we work on, and in Northern Nevada we have the Great Basin LCC. And all this is integrated all together. So we need to consolidate data and work together with other agencies to build these landscape cooperative. Okay. And this is, thank God for this conference, or this meeting here. I didn't know about this here when I came into this program. But knowing that there's a geospatial training and awareness website out there for GIS is really a great opportunity for us in our field, and seeing that there's these things out here. We also work on some of this with our Southern Nevada Agency partnership. But seeing how the Forest Service and who we got working on this too is USDA putting out sites there. We also work with, I've worked in the past with the USDA on their remote sensing sites. So having a Service First guideline out there helps out with a lot of this stuff. Geospatial Training Awareness website successes, training materials available for all to use, which is good to hear. Leverage agency resources for comprehensive training opportunities. The materials are updated regularly, which is a key component to any kind of training. We've run through that problem in Southern Nevada with the BLM and the Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife. Having a resource like this available is a great tool. One of the things with the Esri software, they upgrade it every year, so each year we have to redo our materials. Having a resource like this available is invaluable. So, like I say, you can serve a lot of money and collaborate on training needs. Some of the challenges need input, yeah, and we'll start working together and having the advertising out there to come out and know that this resource is available. That is a very big key. So part of that is advertising on programs such as this. And not being used to its fullest potential, I think we're all guilty of that to some degree. And the Southern Nevada Agency Partnership is an organization formed under the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act of 1998. It facilitated partnering of 4 land management agencies, the BLM, Forest Service, National Park Service, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Southern Nevada. SNAP consists of a board of directors, which are the agency leads, and 14 interagency teams. The SNAP GIS team was designed to support the organization as a whole. We began work in 2005. And most of us are closing out on the financial end of the project, but our work is just beginning. We have a long way to go yet, but we have made great strides in the program with the GIS. Our work is to support all 14 teams that are on there. We have within the SNAP teams, there is the SNAP restoration team, SNAP desert dumping team, and several more. But those two come to light now. With the restoration team, they work together, all 4 agencies, on developing a database for restoration. And that database is in the process of being uploaded now with data from all 4 agencies, meeting all protocols for all 4 of them. Challenges for the SNAP GIS team is working with variables such as the agency missions. Each agency has a different mission. Forest Service has their mission with recreation and on the Spring Mountains, where Fish and Wildlife has preservation and wildlife management on the refuges. So working together, we all have to work around each of our own mission goals. And that gets into our organizational goals also. Our national initiatives are coming down. This is where working in the field and getting national directives from Washington comes down. And we call these stovepipes, but sometimes those stovepipes cut us off from linking our systems together. And that's one of the keys, is how do we work around that? And that's, with changing technology, I think it makes it a lot easier, but it is still a challenge with the changing technology, always changing on us. We have to always keep updated and costs that are associated with stuff. Data integration is always a problem. That goes back to our missions and our goals within this system. And then when you get into IT security, that is one of the hardest challenges we've had to run into in our system. But actually, I don't know where the barrier is on the IT security situation, because when we talk at the local level, they all think it's a great idea, but for some reason they think there's a barrier that keeps us from communicating our systems across agency boundaries. But then when we had a meeting with some of our national leaders in the IT field, they were all thinking it's a great idea. So where do we go from there? Our successes. We partnered up with the Mojave Desert Ecosystem Program. They've been in place since 1995, working in the Mojave Desert, and we now actually supplement their program by us joining up with them by putting in Southern Nevada GIS data into their system, which they were kind of lacking on prior to us coming on board with them. Our mobile applications, they're developing mobile applications. One of examples of the mobile applications that was developed through this program was a desert tortoise iPad or iPhone application, where if you're out in the field, you see a desert tortoise, you take a picture, write a little comment down on it, and it sends it into our database in the central area. With that, that's bringing in citizen science into our applied science in the field of desert tortoise recovery. Data's being integrated to better aid in local and regional natural resource management decisions. So not only are we working in Southern Nevada by working with the Mojave Desert area, we're also working on a regional level, and this also aids in probably with the desert LCCs. We also do training almost yearly, depends on the case, and that's where learning about the earlier projects will help us out. And we also share our expertise. Where I have an expertise at Fish and Wildlife Service, Mr. Sappington up at the Park Service may have another expertise that we can draw from and help our agency out by tapping into his expertise in the GIS realm. It's such a large area that it's hard to cover all the aspects of GIS. And partnerships are growing. We're now partnering up with USGS in the local area in Las Vegas, Bureau of Reclamation on the Lower Colorado River region, and Nellis Air Force Base, as well as the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. We're sharing data, integrating data across the board with those agencies also. And actually, we're actually getting cost-free imagery out of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which is a great cost benefit to us. Duplication of data efforts are down. We're communicating better. We're seeing where there is duplication of effort going on. We're working together to collaborate and get that data to work better. And cost-sharing initiatives are out there, too. Not just in Southern Nevada, but I also work in the Northern Nevada area. I've been contacted through the Service First operation. They knew we liked the partner, and they've called me up, and we were able to co-partner with some LiDAR and imagery acquisitions for Stillwater Refuge up in Northern Nevada. So.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Don, for that very informative presentation. So for our question session, we also have Chris Moyer, the National Service First coordinator, on the phone. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing quite well.
Okay, great. Chris, I'm going to ask you to give an update on how things are going with IT in just a few minutes, but first I'm going to ask Don a few questions about his presentation in GIS. So Don, are there rules that block agencies from sharing data sets or GIS layers?
Not that I know of.
Okay. What do you think some of the biggest hurdles are right now to having agencies coordinate and share data and work together?
I don't see any major blockage, not with under the agreements we have. In the GIS community, we're naturally sharing data across the board. So, like I said, traditionally we've always shared data because it was the best way to get our work done. So now I don't think it's ceased to be, and I think it's becoming more of a formalized process.
Okay, thank you. Who owns the final products produced in cross-agency GIS exercises?
The American people. So it's, as I see it myself, it's being paid by taxpayer dollars, and therefore it makes it a public item. So.
Have you ever come across any situation where there's been any ownership issue of shared GIS products?
Not necessarily. We do have some situations where it's proprietary data, especially with imagery that is purchased through a private vendor. And then we also have data that we put into, which is kind of sensitive data, which is socially associated with species data. And that's data that we send up to, like, the Nevada Natural Heritage Program. And it's available to the public, but at a cost. So.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Do you think Service First will make it easier to share data between agencies?
I believe so. I think we have a great opportunity here to formalize a process, and sometimes with the data sharing, it's more personalities than it is regulations or requirements. So I think getting a formalized process makes it a more accessible way to some data too. You don't have the personalities get in the way at that point.
Okay. It seems like common storage in the cloud would be smart for these huge GIS databases. Are there any plans to do that to enhance sharing?
Well, that's what we've done in the Southern Nevada Agency Partnership. The MDP has actually set up a cloud that we set up and serve off our Southern Nevada data off of. So the only problem with the cloud is it's still new technology, and I always kind of joke around that with any cloud, if it rains, there's no more cloud, and, and we have no more data. So there's always a need to keep stuff local, but putting it up on a shared case like that on the cloud makes data a lot more accessible and is nice because a lot of times I don't have to take the extra time to process, put it on a hard drive or a disk or a hard drive and ship it out. I can just point somebody to that website and it goes up there and they can draw it from.
Absolutely. So. Great. Chris, do you have any thoughts on any of these questions?
No, yes, I do have some thoughts on those questions. I know that in the Forest Service, there's a huge effort to consolidate their data systems and get them organized and aligned. And I see, from my perspective, I see efforts like that as being key to the success of being able to share data back and forth in the Service First realm. You know, it's that whole thought of you have to get your own house in order before you can invite somebody in. And that doesn't mean we should sit around and wait for these large initiatives to get done. there are things we can do right now, and there are data sets that can be shared. But I think as some of these big initiatives come to fruition, we'll see it'll open up the doors wider for us to share information back and forth.
Okay, thank you. Let's shift gears for just a few minutes. Chris, would you mind giving our audience an update on what's happening with IT to overcome some of the barriers?
Yes, I'd love to. So, in the history of Service First, the issue of connectivity of computer systems has been there since the beginning. And I had the very fortunate opportunity to sit down with one of the folks who was right at the very forefront of Service First so many years ago. And he said to me, we've been talking about this for over a decade now. So while we have frustrations today, those frustrations have been there for a long time. There are several things happening at the national level that I think are relevant to Service First. They're not specific to Service First, but they will facilitate our ability to interact with joint computer systems, cross-agency credentialing, those types of things. The first one that I'll mention, the Department of the Interior is undertaking what they're calling the IT transformation. And that initiative is really focused, it's internal to DOI, so it would be the Park Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Bureau of Land Management that would be impacted by this effort. They're doing a lot of stuff inside of IT transformation. Some of the key pieces for us, though, in the realm of Service First are they're trying to flatten the network so that there's no firewalls between those three agencies. Which means that we could see each other's intranet sites, which means that I, as a BLM employee, could go to a Fish and Wildlife Service computer and log in with my BLM credential. So it's very tantalizing, and some of those first pieces, the last information I have says that they were going to be completed by the end of this calendar year. Of course, these are big initiatives and they take a long time. We could see those timelines change, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. The reason that that's particularly interesting is because in the realm of Service First, where we talk about going between two different departments, we were at one point discussing connectivity between the Forest Service and three different agencies. Now we're really talking about connectivity between the Forest Service and essentially one network, the DOI network. And that makes it a one-to-one connection, which is a lot easier for us to tackle and make some headway on. So I'm very optimistic that once some of the key pieces in this IT transformation are put into place, that we can really go after getting the Forest Service and the DOI agencies, their computer systems, to talk together. Now, I do know in conversations that I've had with a wide variety of people in the 6 months I've been in this position, there have been places where folks have found ways to get computer networks to talk to each other. So we know that the technology piece will actually work. We just need to get it kind of formalized, that process formalized, get the policy in place that says, yes, we can do this, because we don't want anybody to get in trouble for trying to be efficient. So we'll move those up and we'll get it organized in a way that says, yes, go forward, make these computer networks hook together. Those conversations are actually taking place at the Washington office level. And in fact, coming up in about 2 weeks, there's a conversation with the Department of the Interior, and in particular, that's tied into the fire realm. You know, the fire agencies, or the fire network is huge, and there's a big need to have people be able to communicate in emergency situations. And so with that, I think Service First as a whole will really benefit from, the fire community seems to be moving this forward quite well. So I'll keep supporting them and helping them out, and we'll hopefully reap the benefits of their labors. The other piece that I wanted to share with the group, there is a memo that was signed at the department level between the Department of Agriculture, the Secretary at the Department of Agriculture, and the Secretary at the Department of Interior, that says each of the departments will accept the other department's credentialing process. So I, as a BLM employee, have gone through and got my card, and I meet all the requirements, and all my training, my security training is legitimate. The Department of Ag will accept that as, if I've met it for the Department of Interior, then I'm meeting the laws of the nation, and that's acceptable to the Department of Ag. That memo does exist, and I know that some folks have been starting to use that this year, particularly in the fire realm and around the network connectivity and being able to get people to access other computer systems. There's not any direction around that memo as far as I'm aware. It's out there, it exists, and people can use it. So that would be the second piece of IT that I would share. And I am very, very, very sensitive to the idea or the impact that it has to have two computers on two desks, because I spent 11 and a half years doing that. So I know those pains. It rings true to me, and I hope that I can find a solution in my tenure while I'm in this position. And that's what I have to share on IT at the national level.
Great. Thanks so much for the update, Chris. That's great to hear. I have a question for you. How does Service First enable other technology solutions? For example, in the recent fires, the BLM has taken advantage of the new interconnection security agreements between DOI and USDA. Oh, you already talked about this. So this is a... do you have other examples of where Service First is enabling technology solutions?
Yeah, I do. Don actually gave a great example of that. There was an example there about the invasive plants that the Park Service was working on in the desert Southwest. That started out as a local effort to develop a monitoring protocol and bloomed into 3 different Park Service monitoring networks and 2 different Fish and Wildlife Service areas, all adopting the same protocol, the same technology, sharing crews, sharing data sources and structures. And that was very much a homegrown effort. That was a ground level, hey, we've got to do this work, and rather than do it by ourselves, let's reach across the fence, if you will, and see who's out there and wants to work on this with us. That effort, I think that's just a great, and that just took place this spring. So folks are using this, and you can do these things. And I strongly encourage that kind of approach to things.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Are there any discussions to expand Service First to include other USDA agencies, such as the Farm Service or NRCS?
I mentioned this yesterday, and I'll hit it again. Yes, there have been conversations, ad hoc conversations about including other agencies, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Reclamation, USGS, NRCS in the Department of Ag. There have been conversations, and those are the particular agencies that have really come up, that have bubbled up in the time I've been in this position. Generally, right now, I think we need to work out a few of the pieces around Service First, like some of these streamlining the business processes so that we can get the projects going more efficiently. And then we'll start to talk about bringing in other agencies. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't think that now is the right time to take that on. If we can get our house in order, then let's invite others in.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris. Let's switch gears and go back to GIS for a little bit. Don, the Incident Command System is a model for agency collaboration during emergencies. Do you see a role for Service First with regard to GIS needs during emergencies, such as Hurricane Katrina or Deepwater Horizon?
Oh, definitely we saw it in Katrina and the Deepwater Horizon down there. All the agencies worked very closely together to provide the services that were needed through GIS and others, or other needs within the program to quell the problem. So it's definitely a need.
Okay, great. So it's already happening there.
Yeah, I think it's already happening. I mean, it's a big thing. We're already seeing Orient fire. I mean, GIS personnel come in from all agencies to help out in the fire situation with bear teams and other things, and that's been in place for years.
Okay, great. Regarding GIS effort, to encourage greater visibility and availability of Service First processes, the question asker would like to encourage outreach to the Bureau GIS coordinators. Service First can be another tool in cost sharing on complex geospatial efforts. What's your reaction to that idea, and do you know of any plans for that?
Well, having the GIS coordinators at the national level work together is a very key point. And they have, in a large degree in the past, also prior working with the enterprise agreement, licensing agreement we have with Esri, the software vendor. All the heads and through the FTDC work together in a not so much Service First, but in an interagency program to come up with interagency cooperation across the board. And in this case here, we've got an enterprise agreement that's at the DOI level, and our agencies are also continuing to work together to come up with, not just with that software package, but with others.
Okay.
So there are, and we need the lead from that level, and the guidance from our leads at that level working together, and as an example to us folks working in the field. So,
Great, thank you. See, what do agencies have to do to develop common data standards for Service First projects? Is there a protocol that they need to follow?
not that I know of right now. I mean, that's something where we need, with Service First, to start taking the lead on and develop it with the GIS coordinators working together on their Service First agreements to develop protocols that would help us across the board.
Do you think that at offices that want to develop common data standards, are there examples out there that they can go to?
I'm sure there are.
Okay.
I couldn't give you an example right now, but always look around first and see what there is.
Yeah, before you reinvent the wheel.
Exactly, exactly.
Sounds good, thank you. Let's see. This question is asking, can you please explain the difference between sharing versus integrating the data? What does that really mean from an agency perspective?
Well, sharing data is, if I have data that covers my land, or even outside of it, because on the ES side of the house, we're working inside other agencies' properties to work on BLM properties or something like that when we're looking at an endangered species. So integrating data is putting the data together and combining it. Sharing data is just, here's what I have, and you can integrate it or do what you will with it, but here's the purpose of the data too. That's where you got to explain that when you put it out there, and that's where the metadata is very important to have associated with it too, and that's part of our standards that we follow under the FGDC.
Okay, thank you. Are you aware of any efforts to share access between DOI and USDA centralized geospatial data servers?
That'd probably be more of a question for Chris or somebody at the national level.
Okay.
So.
Chris, do you have any, are you aware of any efforts?
Not off the top of my head, not formal efforts, no. But I do know that there are conversations around that, and I would know who to call to ask if that's happening, but right off the top of my head, I don't know of them per se.
Okay, thanks.
I wouldn't doubt that there are some efforts going on. At the local level, we work with the USDA, and I mean, NRCS has done a soil study map on one of our refuges, and we work very closely with them, so, and sharing data back and forth. So I'm sure it's going on at a higher level. You just got to find out who's doing it.
Okay, sounds good. And Chris, this is a question for you that's probably near and dear to many of our hearts. What's happening in the way of updating phones so that we can use iPhones or Droids, and their ability to access interagency sites by employees?
So, I don't, I guess I do know. So on the Forest Service side, they've just opened that up. They developed the policy and put it in place where employees who have a need for a cell phone or a BlackBerry or a smartphone or something like that can actually get a smartphone now, so we can use that technology. However, there are, of course, additional charges with using a smartphone versus a regular cell phone. And it's at the program manager's discretion to decide who has what, those kinds of things. On the DOI side, I know that we're looking at I know for the BLM, they're looking at that, and there's policy coming forward. It's in the works, but there have been tests of, say, iPads in a variety of locations, and so some folks are using iPads already. I'm not too clear on the Park Service and Fish and Wildlife Service. I haven't had those conversations.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Well, I think we should start wrapping things up. We need a little bit more time to set up before our final session. So, Chris, do you have any final thoughts for the audience on GIS, IT, and other technology?
Well, I'd first like to say thank you, Dawn, for giving this presentation. And I'd like to conclude by saying I'm very aware that IT is an issue, and I'm working on it.
Sounds good. That's an important message for everyone to hear. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Don, final thoughts from you?
When I first got over to Fish and Wildlife Service and was introduced to the Service First through SNAP, it was kind of a joy, to see that we had agencies working together and doing something to prevent duplication of efforts across the board. So, as a taxpayer and a citizen of the United States, it's a joy to see the government working in these kind of efforts to streamline what we need to do in the government and make our jobs easier too as employees for the government. So it is a nice, refreshing thing to see Service First and actually see like this webinar going on too. So it's really good.
Great. Well, thank you so much for participating today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you, Chris. And thanks to everyone for watching the presentation today. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we'll be back for our final session. Our final session will come in from DC and Denver, and we'll have leadership from all 4 agencies participating in that, as well as the speakers that we've had on the presentation. So join us in 15 minutes. And before you go, don't forget to let us know how many people were attending the presentation for the session at your location. Thank you very much, and see everyone very soon. Thanks.